haven't thought too much about it, to be quite honest. We've been so busy surviving, as they say. But now I do remember our 10th and our 20th, and they seem like yesterday. So the time has flown back. And yeah, as you say, when walking around the site, you see the differences from the early days when we had one locomotive and then two locomotives and 7 carriages. That was our first trip to Cape Town, was 7 cars, big deal. And then we grew slowly up to 14, and that was at the end of 93. And then during 94 we started building trains 1 and 2, finishing trains 1 and 2 and get them up to 20 coaches each. So by our 10th anniversary in 99, we had 2 20-coach trains running. And that we thought was about it. We wouldn't want to expand beyond that. But obviously demand has grown, and I've always said that to keep a business going, the most important thing is you've got to sell tickets before anything else, before you worry about the hardware or the route or anything like that. You obviously need to have that to sell, but the most important part is selling tickets. And if you can get that right, then the rest of the train will follow, as the tickets are the locomotive. So there you are, and yes, we've grown from initial staff of about 30. When we came here to this property in 99, after 10 years we were up to 70 staff. We thought that was a big deal, and now we're up at 420. We have 130 cars running now, more or less, with 6 trains that we can run. We're still building train number 6, but we should be finished with that by the end of next year. Our first journey back in 1993 that we undertook to Dar es Salaam, and we had 0 passengers on the going leg, as a result of an agent not performing. And on the way back we had 17 passengers. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out then we lost a lot of money in that on that first journey, and in fact I nearly went bankrupt at the end of 93, which was after 5 years of operation, and that's all due to not selling enough tickets. If you want to run a schedule, the problem is, as the airlines have found out to their horror, you do have to run the schedule, and if you can't full to your break-even capacity, which might be 50 or 60 or 70%, you're going to bite the dust. It's as simple as that. And for the first 5 years of our operation, I couldn't actually understand why it took so long. But then, in hindsight now, I was being really naive, because we're talking to the whole world, and it's a big place, and there's a lot of competition out there. For us to get recognized was very difficult, and I didn't understand that when we started the business. I thought, we're going to run this very luxurious train. There's only one other train really in Africa to compete with us, and we'll do different things which must fill immediately. And we'll go to the Kruger Park, which is a natural extension of every tourist to South Africa's holiday. Well, mistake. And it didn't happen. I think the first trip we had 2 paying passengers. So that doesn't help fill the checkbook. And then during the 5th year of operation, during 93, we were going in and out of break-even. And that was the sadness. As we got to the end of 93, we were really beginning to crack the nut from our international operators, agents, etc. And we were getting publicity in their local newspapers in Germany and America. And so the momentum was there. And by the end of that year, which was just prior to elections, number one, I'd run out of money, and number two, the banks didn't want to lend me anything, and in fact the banks wanted their money back that I'd borrowed from them. And even though I could show that the graph was climbing, albeit by steps, it was climbing, that all we needed was a bit of time, they weren't too happy with that thought. And of course, prior to elections, you must remember that the political situation was such that nobody knew what was going to happen in '94. However, we were lucky what we did during December in '93, we launched the Cape Town to Vic Falls combination. And at the time, we did it during the English winter. So the first newspaper advert was late December, after Christmas, 27th, somewhere around there. And with that advert, I didn't think actually that we would be successful. And I couldn't pay for the advert. That was the big worry for me. Was how was I going to sell a motor car or something? But I had no motor cars. I had nothing more to sell. And but the agent involved said, "Don't worry, we'll take your contribution from the ticket sales." And I thought, "Hello, you're confident, aren't you? Well, we'll see what happens." Anyway, he phoned me at the end of the month and said, "Look, we sold 4 train loads already, and there's tremendous demand." And I said, "Wow, just send me money," which he did. And I rushed into the bank the first sort of business day during that period. It was between Christmas and New Year, it was just after New Year. But we still had a few days before the 10 days you've got to pay was up. And I went into the bank and said, "Guys, here's a few bob, just leave me alone. We'll be okay." And we were okay. And that injection of passengers in January, February '94 was just enough to take us through into the black. And the Rovos were amenable to our expansion. So I approached them and I bought 38 carriages from them about just after the elections, in fact. And that 38 helped us to continue the building program, or the expansion program. Funny thing was that I was very purist when I started. We just wanted wooden carriages with a clear story and the 1924 dining cars, because that's what originally attracted me to trains, was the 1924 pillar design, which actually goes back to 1911. And we had the 1911 coach here as well. When we were wanting to buy these new coaches during early '94, there were no more wooden coaches available. The museum had some down in the Cape, but we basically had the rest. And I think I built up to about 20 wooden or 25 wooden coaches, and then we couldn't find any more. And then I thought, whoops, what do we do now? And then I thought, well, we've got to go to the steel coaches. There are plenty of them available. And it was a very big worry for me, going from this beautiful wood. How do I duplicate this atmosphere in a steel car, which at the time was Formica, and malthoid, it was just quite sort of cold and impersonal, from this beautiful wood, which when you take the old coaches, we'd sand it down and we could do a paint finish on it, which really made it look fantastic. Anyway, we built the coaches we put in as much as we could to try and mimic the old, but we weren't successful. And the first people coming on the train said, "Nah, they don't like this train, they like the old one." So so we had a mixture of old and new traveling together. And it took about 2 years for people to get used to the new style. Now, of course, I think the new style is great. It's all beautiful wood and everything, which we've added to it with a few moldings and things like that. And our paint finishes are slightly different, and the tinting of the wood, the coloring is slightly different. So we've managed to get the patina to come through, which I thought was quite important. However, so those are the sort of highlights and the problems we had. But once we were running by '96, I think '97, I bought my wife a motor car. How's that? So we knew we had really made it. So I bought her a car and I bought myself a second-hand car, which I've still got today actually. I still drive today. And there you are. So from then on we never really looked back. So I would say that sort of '96 was the last time that we were looking backwards. From then on we were battling to cope with growth, which brings its own problems. But that, of course, is something else, and at least it's a positive direction. So 30 years that we sort of reaching, it hasn't really struck me. I might give myself an extra bottle of rum, I think, a present on that day. But it hasn't really struck me that we're that old. It's passed in a bit of a blur, actually. The first 5 years being survival and discovery. The second 5 years being a mayhem trying to build more carriages and learn about this building program. Then the third 5 years, I think, was trying to steady the ship and get more staff on board and come down to these premises here. And we've got 60 acres here now that we rent from the railways. But we started with 12. And we had to rebuild as we went because it was derelict. And so that was quite a program in itself. And then we moved on to doing other journeys. You know, we'd been doing Dar, but we started the golf trip. We started running to Durban. We started running to Namibia. So there was all this voyage of discovery, which is great fun, and yet there's a lot of pressure involved because you've got to get it right. You've got to make sure that it can sell. You know, what the product that you package has to be that nice that it looks attractive. So it's, you know, sort of one 5-year blur, the next 5-year blur. I think the only time that was really easy was the first year or two, where nothing was really happening and we were building and having fun. After that, we got onto this bicycle and we've been pedaling faster and faster ever since. We started running to Dar es Salaam, as I mentioned earlier, in '93. And that was basically what bankrupted me, on top of everything else. But it was the worst decision at the time. I mean, I can remember agonizing over whether should we go or should we not. And at the time, I mean, it was a very, very serious decision because I knew how much money we were going to lose and we didn't have it. But I made that decision, and the worst decision at the time, because 6 months later we nearly did go bankrupt. But today it's the best decision I ever made, because we're doing Dar es Salaam 5 times a year. We usually fill it, and obviously if you fill a train you make profit, and that profit has helped with the growth. And at the same time it opened my eyes to other activities, you know, in the north, and it got us into running. We then started running to Vic Falls on a regular basis in '94. We then started running to Namibia as a result of it being a long journey and being successful. And we started the golf tours also as a result. So the spin-off was a lot. And also I got to understand and know East Africa, specifically Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. I drove around that area quite a bit, flew over it quite a bit. Then I thought, wow, you know, this is something that's in the future still. It might be nice to run a train up there. At the end of the day, we were running from here to Dar es Salaam. You go through Zambia and you get to a place called Kapiri in Portia. Kapiri is the split. This line goes to Dar es Salaam. This line goes up to Lubumbashi in the DRC. And from Lubumbashi, it sort of turns westward, follows the escarpment all the way down to Dololo on the border between DRC and Namibia, Angola. And then you jump across the river to Luau. Luau is 1,350 kilometers down to Lobito. And it's virtually a straight line. And again, it's very interesting. It's running right on the escarpment. And that was, at the time of it being built, Robert Williams, who took over from Cecil Rhodes actually with the planned railway expansion. He was the instigator and had to raise the finances and everything. So they started building in 1908, and Lobito was chosen because it was a deep water port. And it was a straight line from there to the Copper Belt, which had been discovered in 1900. Now the Belgians had jumped ahead of the Rhodes Charter Company for the history. Rhodes was very upset that he missed that. His people were actually going to stick, because you were just sticking flags in the ground in those days to decide who ran what. And Rhodes's men were actually on the way down back to South Africa to tell him, okay, it's a good deal. And it was intercepted by the Belgians. And they said, oh, that's a very interesting letter you've got here. And they promptly went and stuck their flag in the Katanga province, which is why it's the DRC, and it's got a very funny border going into Zambia. Anyway, I'm boring you with history here maybe, but 1908 they started building the Lobito to the border through to Luau and Dulolo and then Kolwezi. Kolwezi is the center of the Katanga copperfields. And they finished it in 1928 because of course the war, the First World War, interrupted the whole show. Anyway, they finished it and it ran until 1975 at the time of the Angolan War, Civil War. That of course put an end to that. So for 27 years nothing ran. What did the Copperfield do? They started sending the stuff down to Dar es Salaam and down to South Africa for export through Durban. When they reopened the line in 2002 or 3, it was of course damaged. They got the Chinese in who rebuilt the line, all 1,350 kilometers up to the DRC border. DRC in the meantime was supposed to be building their section from Lubumbashi to the border so that they could actually Kolwezi to the border so that the copperfields would be connected with the port. Well, that section hasn't happened. They have been sort of repairing the line here and there, putting in the odd extra steeper, but it's still not in good condition. I went and trolleyed it in 2015 and then it was shocking. It was really poor. In fact, the grass was 6 foot high in most places and you couldn't even see the railway line in a lot of them. But they've done some work and now they're running a train once a week or so, mixed goods and passenger. The finish of the Chinese only finished building about 2016, that they handed over the line somewhere around there to the Angolans, and there's still some unhappinesses there because the loops are not long enough for the goods trains. But the Angolans, I think, took possession from the Chinese contractors, and they're now trying to fix things up for themselves. So I visited with them, visited with DRC, still waiting for the final letters of authority from DRC. Once I've got that, I can then start putting my people onto the ground to go and do all the practical analysis before the journey. But you know, once I looked at this, oh well, hang on a second, this Angolan line is now nearly finished. The DRC are fixing their line a little bit. Hang on, why don't we do east-west? I chucked it out into the marketplace and there was immediate interest, and I thought, okay. And that's when I went to trolley the line and I rode the rails in Angola, put the whole itinerary together and we advertised it. In no time at all, we filled the train. And those are sort of the adventurous passengers that we might have that have been with us before on maybe the Dar es Salaam trip or one of our other long trips. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's quite exciting. And for DRC and Angola, I can only see what we did for Dar es Salaam when we went there in '93. There was no tourism infrastructure. It was shocking. You couldn't find goods and services, and telephones were few and far between. Within 3 years of our going there, they started building the first smart hotel, and that's still running today. But for us, that was like the sun coming up. You know, suddenly we had a hotel that I could book my people into. It was 5-star at the time. We could book our people into it. It had telephones and all sorts of wonderful things. And with that went, the growth of supplies and so on. So I think we had a lot to do with the growth of their tourism industry, because our passengers, when we put them in, would spend a week in that area, doing the Ngorongoro crater, doing the Serengeti, doing Zanzibar, some flying up to Kenya to do those game reserves. So I think what we did there was fantastic, and really it was the kickstart. And I'm thinking now, because there's no tourism in DRC, except the lunatic fringe like me who arrive with a backpack and wander around there. And so it's all quite exciting, and I think we can then, Angola is really ripe for it. They're crying for help to get their tourism business going. And along that railway line, there are some opportunities. So I'm actually quite excited about the possibilities of doing a lot for those countries, and of course for the same time for ourselves. I'm hoping that it'll become an annual, maybe more than an annual event, you know, maybe we can do it 2 or 3 times a year, we'll see. Then we can also possibly do Cape Town to Lobito to Dar, and Dar to Cape Town. We can do the triangle. Anyway, it's all quite exciting.